first thing that pops up is, where do you start in choosing a projector? And when you're starting out, going cheap is quite okay, but it tends to be better to at least get into the second-hand used type of projectors of at least 3,000 ANSI lumens. And I use that very carefully because, you can go online and you'll see a whole bunch of $300 projectors saying, oh, we're 4,000 lumens or whatever, but they're not talking about ANSI lumens. So when you're talking about projection mapping, the first thing to be aware of is how you actually properly measure the brightness of a projector, and that's in ANSI lumens. So if you get a short throw projector is generally the way to go. You can use others, but just the practicalities of where you place a projector relative to a house, a short throw projector is generally the best option if you can lay your hands on one. Don't go to an ultra short throw projector. If you go to an ultra short throw projector, what they do, they're made for doing in-home movie theatre type experiences. And when you try and project them across a house, then what you're going to get is a bunch of distortion at the edges. So that's not helpful at all. So stick with either your short throw or your normal throw projector. You can, and I have used a long throw, but you have to be a long way back. And the further you are back, the less bright that a projector is going to be. Personally, I've just moved from a bulb style projector of 6,000 lumens to an LED 5,500 lumen ANSI lumen projector. The 6,000 finally died after many years of use. One of the things to keep in mind, I made this comment earlier, if you're using a bulb type projector and you're buying secondhand, be aware that whatever the manufactured ANSI lumens were when it was produced is not what it'll be after any general period of use. So a bulb type projector will degrade in terms of how bright it is fairly rapidly into its lifespan. And the older it is, the more that actually applies. But you can get away with all sorts of things. So when I do projection on pumpkins, your little $300 cheap LED projector works just fine. If you're doing a basic house and it's a very light colour and a very clean texture, then you'll get away with something in the range of 3,000, 3,500 ANSI lumens. If you're projecting onto brick, and particularly if it's textured, then you're really starting to need something up around 5,500, 6,000. When you get into the commercial grade stuff, tens of thousands of dollars, and you're really up at 10,000 plus ANSI lumens. For most hobbyists, that's never going to happen. There's also a whole range of ways that you can project. So when you're projecting a house, obviously you're going to be projecting onto the house, but you might be doing other things within your program where you might use rear projection that puts the projector inside the house and you're projecting out through a window. And you can buy fancy screens and whatever else, but you can just buy cheap white or grey lycra type material, string it out on your window, and it'll work fine as a screen. It'll also work in a yard. The problem with it in a yard is the wind. But, it's cheap. You buy it in a roll. You can string it up anywhere that you actually want to project something onto. When it comes to software and putting a show together, I think historically and certainly on the information that's available online, Adobe-based products have been around for a long time and have strong following in how you put video content together. But I've got to be honest, for anybody who's just getting started, DaVinci Resolve is the way to go. Most of what you want to do, it can do for free and is a professional grade software. The only thing that you can't do with DaVinci Resolve, or not really handily, is rotoscoping. And Rotoscoping is where you're pulling a bit of video out of the rest of the video. So you might be extracting a character out of a video scene, that type of stuff. The paid version does it really well, but it's a bit of trial if you're trying to do it for free. You can do it in Blender. Blender is an open source product. It's got a steep learning curve, and I guess all video editors do to a degree, but Blender even more so because it's a 3D modeling environment as well. But there's lots of options there in terms of how to pull stuff together. You can buy some basic content in line, and I've tended to do that as a way to mix stuff where I might be using a whole bunch of image-based stuff to lay out the facade. So I did made the house into a gingerbread house, but then had video content that was purchased playing within that. You can do it that way. You can do all sorts of fancy transitions as well. It really can be as elaborate as you want it to be. A bit like working with pixel lights, though. It's not something that you leave to the last minute. It's something you plan. It's something that you try and tell a story with, and all that takes a lot of time, planning, and effort. So I guess that'd be my brief summary of projection mapping, if that's a place to start.
No, that's good. That's a good summary. You were talking about, I'm trying to multitask here. I apologize. So you were talking about, DaVinci Resolve, and I think, yeah, I mean, unless you know, like Adobe After Effects is pretty popular. We're doing a lot of stuff, but I use DaVinci Resolve pretty much for all my video and recording.
Yeah, perfect for the task. As I said, the only reason really to go to the paid version would be rotoscoping. So when you are doing video content for projection mapping, you do want to really mix stuff up. You might want to pull some characters out and combine them in different ways, and you need a way to do that cleanly. So generally that's where you're getting into the paid version stuff, but it's AI managed, so it's worth its value if you're doing a lot of it. But most people start with really simple content they either find or they buy online to get started, and I would recommend that as the way to go when you're first starting out. When it comes to software for actually setting up projection mapping, there's some great tools. Some of them are free that to lay out a projection map, you first have to have an outline of your house. And there's lots of ways you can do it. You can do it with an editor like GIMP, which is free. There's other ways to do it as well. But there's some free software online. I'm just trying to remember what it's called. Let me just have a quick look here. Projection Mapper, it's called. And what that lets you do is set up your projector in the yard. It basically projects a big white space onto your house, and you take your mouse and you basically draw around the outline of your house. What that lets you do is to be able to capture the perspective of your house from where the projector is located. Once you've got that image, and I would suggest you stick with the HD 1920 1080 in doing that, and it's better to use a projector in that range as well. But once you've got that, you can actually create the content knowing that it's going to fit to your house. In terms of my projector, the way that I actually mount that, I use the in-ground portion of a rotary clothesline is the base, concreted into the ground. The pole slips into that, and then it's got a custom 3D printed mount that lets me adjust it. But you want to make sure that the settings that you have for your projector are always the same, because if you're fiddling around with the projector, there's lots of things that you can tweak and twist, and it'll throw out that original style of mapping. I guess I'm happy to share a little bit of what a video looks like for that I did in the past, or take any questions depending on what people might have.
I think that's a great idea.
I don't think we can do screen sharing. No, we can't.
I can give you, I can give you, hang on one second. Let's see. I think here I can give you, allow. If I make you co-host, you should be able to now.
No, it's still saying disabled at the moment.
All right, let me see here. Don't know why. Oh, hang on. Now try it.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
So there's a bunch of different things going on there within that video. So the textures for the house are just basic images. I use a program called Resolumi, which was originally designed for video VJing. And the reason I use it is that I've had it for years. I think my version is so old, it's back to version 4 or something, and I think they're up to 7 or 8 now. But for projection mapping, it's wonderful in that you can create a show. I actually don't know if I can put it here. Can create layers that are basically bits of your show stacked together. But basically, if you're doing it in a video editor, you are doing the same sort of thing. So you are actually laying out a whole bunch of different items, one above the other, that then can have different types of animated effects that are added to them. Currently working on a pirate theme one this year for Halloween. In that one, I'm actually using Stable Diffusion, which is an AI image generator, to do a whole range of different types of backgrounds that I'm then interlacing with various other video content. So there's all sorts of creative ways that you can develop content and then mix it together to come up with any sort of particular look, theme, or idea that you're going for.
You're sharing something we're not seeing.
Sorry, that might have been Resolumi. Let me see if I can bring it up again. So this is Resolumi. Again, as I said, a program it's created specifically for video content and mapping it together on a different surface. So often used in VJing for big discos, those types of things. But it's great for doing projection mapping because it lets you put a show together by mapping out the various bits of the house and then overlaying different types of content on it. Yeah. So if anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to try and answer what I can. I don't consider myself an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I have been playing around in that space for quite a number of years now.
Do you have a video that runs on there so you can see what it looks like, or just curious if it, like on this preview, if it actually shows up?
Yeah, I'd be a bit reticent to try and do it on this because it's weird in how you set it up between displays, and you really have to have that set the right way in the first place, and it's not something you do on the fly, to be honest. I guess what I could show is what these are the various layers of the stacks as to how it's mapped to various bits of the house and where it sits within the individual elements that make up the projection mapping itself. You can think of it a bit like doing props with this type of an approach. So each of these are the various masks for where everything sits, and it can be pinned and bent to whatever surface that it actually has to map to. So you have a range of options in terms of whether it's a linear, Bezier, perspective type of item. You've got different ways that you can map it around into an object. As I said, this is a professional tool for doing this, but you can do pretty much the same thing in a open source picture editor like GIMP, just by creating mask layers. So if you split your house into bits, then each layer or each mask lets you do the same thing. It lets you pull out the various bits that then can have content in a video editor specific to that area. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's easier to watch a YouTube video as to how to do that than it is to actually explain it. But if you think of all the various elements of your house, your doors, your windows, whatever, you're creating a mask for each of them, and then each of them becomes a display area for a piece of content that you can mix and match. And as I said, you can do that in a program like GIMP or Photoshop, and then bring those masks into a video editor to then play various types of content, whether they be video or pictures, within that particular masked area.
Thanks, that helped.
All right, what else? What else can we talk about on this topic?
So I have another question I can ask, I guess. So how, like the projector you talked about was, you said like something like this surface here is using about a 30, you said somewhere like a 5,000 lumen, ANSI lumen projector, and how far away from the house is it sitting? I mean, I know you talked about the throw and everything, but just trying to get an idea of like how far back does it have to be to project that wide, and just from a perspective of never having done this at all and trying to get an idea of what surface is, you know, like how far do you have to put it, and from, you know, your experience anyway.
Well, the projector I'm using, the new one for this year is the BenQ LU 935ST. That is a short throw projector, LED. It's a two-story house. It sits high on a rise. And the projector is about halfway down the driveway. It's probably about, what would it be, 10 to 15 metres back with a short throw projector. I prefer to use two, but I just can't justify the costs of them. But this does work fine. It's just...
So most short throw projectors are like a 0.5 range, meaning if your house was like 50 feet wide, you would have to be about 25 feet back. Some projectors
Okay.
had like 0.4, some it's 0.6, but most of them are around 0.5 for a short throw projector. So it's if your house is 50 feet wide, you'd have to be 25 feet back. And if it's extremely tall, then that makes it more of a challenge.
Yeah, to some extent. Most houses with a HD 1920 by 1080, not too bad, but you're quite right in terms of the range varies between the projectors, even things that are called a short range. There's actually quite a bit of differences depending on the individual brands as to what's doing actually what distance. There are calculators available online where you can plug in the make and model of your projector, and it will tell you for a given size how far back it's going to need to be. So I would suggest that you use one of those to figure out for your projector what the starting point is, but it's just as easy to go out there with a something plugged into the projector and walk back until you find out what covers your house. You certainly want to be as close as you can get. If there are competing light sources, that's going to be a struggle. So if you are mixing LEDs with projected type content, I do that, but all of the LED stuff is about halfway down the driveway down to the front. There's nothing on the house. Probably the closest thing to it would be the strips that run up either side of the driveway. But you want to have as little competing light as possible. Even street lights, if you're using a 3000 ANSI lumen projector and you've got bright street lights, it's going to struggle. Whereas if you're in a nice dark area, it's probably going to be fine.
Oh, cool. Thanks for all the help.
All right. Well, this is kind of interesting. What else? Trying to move it along here. I can't help. I don't know any. This is not my strong point. So,
So projection mapping can easily be used to just create a virtual matrix that you're using along with your light show, like on your garage or an additional screen in your yard. It doesn't, or even just from your windows projection from inside your house to out. It doesn't, you can add projection to your light shows without it having to distract from your light show itself. You can use it to complement your light show.
You
And you can get
and
your projectors to run directly through like X Lights or Lightorama even can run your projectors in sync with your show.
You can, and there was some earlier discussion about how to turn projectors on and off automatically as part of that sequencing. I guess in that sense, that's closer to using your house or something else more as a screen. Genuine 3D projection mapping tends to take advantage of whatever the structural features are of a building to make that part of the animation or the illusion that is trying to be conveyed. And there's all sorts of different ways you can do that. Just to digress a little bit, I mean, part of what we're putting together for Halloween this year is a walkthrough area of Davy Jones' locker, which is going to be about 6 meters by 6.5 meters, 6 screens inside of it. I'm using forced 3D perspective there. And what that means is that you basically create a fake border on a screen that people presume is the actual hard border, but you can have content come past it so it looks like it's 3D and coming out of the screen. So, you know, I've got sharks that look like they're popping their head through the thing and skeletons that pop up and stick their head through the window. Projection mapping in terms of what you'll see on the fancy stuff online is using optical illusion tricks like that to take advantage of the structural features of the building to enhance the effects that can actually be done. That's a whole other topic in terms of the complexities involved. Some of it is fairly straightforward in as much as if you want to do destruction type physics, you can create that in Blender, a 3D modeling program, add it to a video to make it look like the house shatters and falls down. You can do simple stuff like that. Overlaying something really simple like snowflakes is really simple, but it can get way more complicated from there. My best advice would be to look at light and shadow. So if you think of your house from a particular viewpoint and you shone a spotlight on it and you move that spotlight, what you would see are the shadows of all of the eaves and whatever move as you actually move that light. You can do that virtually in video content to give that same illusion. So it gives the sense of the content actually moving across the surface in 3D, even though it is only a 2D projection. But by manipulating the shadows and the light, even if you've just got a spider running over the outside of the house, if it's got a shadow underneath it that moves with it, then your brain tells you that that's a 3D object. And that's what actual 3D projection mapping is when you're using those types of visual tricks. You're not just putting a flat content on your house. You're doing something that's telling your brain that this is meant to be a 3D thing.
And like with most things, if you wanted to dabble into projecting something on your house, not getting too complex with the 3D stuff, it's always a good place to just start with like a Christmas facade that complements the story that you're telling with your lights. And there are companies out there that will create a show for you. Say you wanted a gingerbread show or something like that. There's different companies that will put that together if you're for you for a fee, of course, if you're overwhelmed by this thought of creating your own video content to begin with. Some people start with just buying a show and then they create their own shows. Some people just buy shows forever because they don't want to deal with the creative side of designing a show, but want to have something on their house to wow their neighbors with or something.
Absolutely. And, it's a bit like pixel lighting. Same thing applies. Not everybody's going to map their own show. You can buy the basic content and that can be really simple stuff, or it can be really custom made for your particular environment. And there are plenty of companies out there that do that. You basically send them two things. You send them the picture outline of your house, done with one of those programs to give you that outline from the perspective of the projector, and a photograph taken from the same perspective, hopefully at the same resolution. And what they can then do is create the content for you that will then lay on to your house. Once you've actually got it in a video, you can actually do pretty simple stuff. You can run the video off anything like a Raspberry Pi, or for some projectors, you can just plug a USB in and loop content on it. It doesn't have to necessarily be complicated. The main thing is that if you've got a projector outside, you do need to think about how you weatherproof it. Projectors put out huge amounts of heat. You have to consider how you're going to ventilate it while still keeping it safe. And depending on where you are in the world, you might have to secure it. All those things can be complicated depending on where it's got to sit relative to your house.
Yeah, I think that's good. Did anybody talk about protecting the gear?
Right. In terms of my stuff, I just create plastic boxes with fans. We do live in a very nice part of the world and don't have to get too paranoid about securing stuff too rigorously. The projector is bolted to a a stand connected to a post that's then sunken into the ground. So it's not easy to run off with. When I do run mine, I actually use it with an open bottom plastic container box. So think of like your storage containers turned upside down with a Perspex sheet put on the front side, siliconed in to hold it in place. But even upside down, and that leaves the bottom open, you still want to have fans circulating the air around. If you're using particularly a bulb type projector, it's going to put out a bunch of heat, and it's in an enclosure, and it's going to get really hot really fast. And if it's too hot, it'll go into thermal shutdown, and that's not what you want in the middle of a show.
Yeah, a lot of people build plywood boxes to house their projectors and put in the USB fans. And depending on what part of your country, some people even have to put in reptile heaters for the snow. There are a couple companies that you can buy professionally built metal boxes to house your projector. Some people cable them and bolt them to the floor. I put a smart switch in there so I know if someone jiggles my box that it alerts my phone and I can go running out of my house. I put mine in a plastic container that I drilled holes in and put fans in and put vents in because didn't feel like building the plywood box, but the plywood box version is very common.
And if you want to start off really simple, I mean, things like animated pumpkin faces for Halloween is a great simple way to start. You can do it with a dirt cheap projector, and it's a ton of fun. And sort of work your way up from there. It's a bit like playing around with pixels. You don't start out with tens of thousands. You start out with something small and learn from there.
And when you're thinking about projectors, a lot of people in this market go for the used projectors, like former classroom models or office building models that people are selling in masses out there. You can usually find a good deal. Some people just bite the bullet and buy new projectors, but most of us tend to start out with a used projector, and then you may end up having to buy a $70 lamp to go with it.
Yeah, just overestimate what you might need in the ANSI lumens, because a used projector, a bulb projector, will normally have degraded over time. That's just normal for those types of projectors. So, go as high as you can, but I think that's a great way to start. Pick up a bargain and have a play, even if it's just in a small area of your show rather than a whole house. It is a really interesting medium to mix and match and do some pretty impressive stuff with.
I was thinking of doing some sort of like 3D snow globe idea but it'd be a smaller thing that would tie into the full show, or maybe just a separate element to look at, but not much bigger than, not the whole side of my house, but something that could easily be looked at, but I could like bite size.
Yeah, I've taken an exercise ball before and projected it and turned it into a snow globe in my yard down closer to the front, so it's easier for people to see. I run that as just a separate part of my show that isn't necessarily tied in with the overall sequencing. But yeah, doing things like that is a cute little way of supplementing what you're doing, kind of like an animated physical prop kind of thing, but using a projector to do it.
Yeah, and you can, and that same mapping software or whatever is what you would use to achieve that.
Well, depending what you wanted to project in it, check out Atmos Effects. They actually have a snow globe version of some of their video content that's meant to be played in like a rounded snow globe. So that's a good way to start, where you don't even have to necessarily design your own content. You can just use one of their snow globe creations at Atmos FX.
Atmos Effects. Okay.
Atmos Effects has content for Christmas, Halloween, Thanksgiving, you name it. They've got stock content for it. There are others as well, but that's a great place just to get some really great content to start with, even if it's small.
Yeah, a lot of us call Atmos the gateway drug to projection mapping. Because a lot of us started with Atmos in our windows or those cute little jamboree pumpkins, which I did include in my whole overall mapping because my mother loved those. But yeah, a lot of us started out with those as window displays, and all of a sudden we've got a whole house turned into a gingerbread.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. I need to start pretty small and just kind of get an idea how this whole thing works before I try to.
Yeah, it's a fun thing to kind of dip your toes in and start. And I also turned a child's playhouse into a gingerbread house and project like a Santa's workshop inside of it. So as part of, I run a couple little projectors in the yard as well as the full projection mapping. So things like that is cute. And I had like a button on it that people could push the button. It's like, do you want to build a snowman or do you want Santa? And it changed between doing a Santa projection versus building a snowman. So different little ways to have it interactive for people using projectors.
Oh, neat. Sounds really fun. I'll have to take a look at that because I do an event at my apartment, and it'd be fun to put something interactive with it.
Yeah, so if you want to do interactive, a good simple way of doing that is using a Sprite media player with just a button on it. So it could change from doing video content 1 to video content 2, or however you want to have it set up. So using a Sprite media player is a real easy way to do it. You could do it with Raspberry Pis and all of that if you're comfortable with those too. But just a Sprite media player, usually around $80 on Amazon, and then you can buy a little cheap button for it.
Cool. I have to write all this information now. Now, like, uh-oh. Thank you.
All right. So we got through 50 minutes of that. I will say that, yeah, I don't do projection mapping. I wanted to, but so I've got a projector sitting right here on my table, still in the box. There's a lot of good videos out there too. I mean, if you go to YouTube, there's a ton of them out there, and folks kind of doing different things. And one of our own too, if you all know Jordan Nash, I think most people do. He actually would be as a great resource to hit on, to talk about, doing projection mapping. So I think it's I think it'd be worthwhile to ping him. We tried to get him to do a class, but he does other venues that he can't do them all. So he was busy today anyway. I'm trying to think of what else we could talk about. We talked a little bit about security. I think when it comes to some people, you're lucky there, right? Because here people see something and they feel the need to take a look at it and see if they can use it. We haven't had any problems personally, but I think a lot of people have their gear set up so they could bring it in at night, especially if it's not well protected. Or where they have, cameras and motion sensors and stuff. So
yeah, I bring my projector in at night but I sit on the paranoid side. There's a lot of people in the community that literally just bolt it to the ground and leave it there for 3 months straight. But I've never had that sense of security in my life to be able to do something with that, because I would cry if it was gone and I couldn't do my show the next day. So I'd be like, I'd rather just spend the time to bring in and out, and my lifestyle allows for that, but other people don't, so they just leave it out.
You mentioned before
Yeah.
that you use some home automated related stuff, and I think there's a workshop later on about that. You can use that as security type triggers. So you can do proximity sensors pretty easy that are wireless, so that if anybody goes near it, you actually get a notification, and it can do other things as well. So,
and a lot of it is just disguising your projector in your display. Because if it look like putting things in front of it or around it so it's not like a beacon, and thinking about placement. Like I could have covered my house in one full projector instead of using the two if I had moved it closer to the sidewalk. But I didn't want it within arm's reach of the sidewalk because I felt people would mess with it more, and I wouldn't have an opportunity to disguise it more by putting things in front of it. Of course, people are going to know that it's there, but it's not so tempting if you can literally walk by and just kick the box. You also have to worry about people defacing things. Unfortunately, people don't like other people to have nice things, so they tend to destroy them in the world.
Yep.
That's unfortunate. I put mine inside some giant presents, so they're actually part of the display itself. And when you do things like Halloween, you can actually build them in. If you're building your own props, you can build them into foam type enclosures.
Tombstones.
can become part of the actual scenery itself.
What about enclosures for projectors that has extremes? I guess extreme from +10 to -15. Dang.
There are several people on some of the projection mapping Facebook posts that have done really good detailed things on how they built their boxes. They have like humidity sensors in there. The people have they have like things that suck the humidity out of their boxes depending what part of the world they're in. They're using reptile heaters in there. I'm in sunny Southern California, so I worry about my box overheating. So for me, it's just venting air in and out of the box to keep it cool.
Yeah, that's always a problem, right? You want to make sure, because if you don't have the proper controls around your, one of the worst things you could have is humidity get in there, moisture get in there. Now you have a bigger problem, right? So there's a lot of considerations for that kind of gear, especially if it's going to cool down. And you were talking
That's why
before,
some of those people have those heaters and stuff in there. But I live in California, so it's not something I've personally had to deal with. We don't do weather here, except for we did have a hurricane last week, but whatever.
Yeah, I know, right? The once in how many years?
Yeah.
And the
I'm in
earthquake
Australia,
at the same time.
I'm in Australia, so it's actually summertime for Christmas, so not a problem that way. But again, your home automation gear and a lot of that is now wireless. You don't need cords; it's all battery operated. So putting those sensors in is actually really simple to do.
Yeah, I have temperature sensors in my box as well as the Raspberry Pi in there with temperature sensors. But my sensors in the box would alert my phone if the temperatures fell higher below a certain range in case something wasn't working the way it's in case something fell against and blocked my air vents. It would tell me if it started to overheat or something like that.
All right. Well, we've got about 8 minutes. 6 minutes. I appreciate you guys, Gaz and Shauna, for pinch hitting in here. That's what it's all about, right? So it is a community. I think we sometimes we have to do that, but I appreciate it. And then, when we do this again next year, if you want to do a class on it, we'd certainly welcome to have you come in and do a class for everybody.
Yep, love to.
All right.
Have any of you played around with short throw projectors?
Yeah,
short throw is generally what is used for full home projection mapping. I use an ultra short throw inside the gingerbread house I'm using, but that doesn't really work for full house projection mapping because it distorts things. So it's really just short throw, what most people use. Some people do use a standard throw, but most have better results using a short throw because you could be closer to your house to keep the lumens as bright as possible.
Yeah, I've got one that I mount under my soffit to project down onto my garage door.
Yeah, those ultra short throws work good for something like a garage door or a screen or my gingerbread house, but trying to do an ultra with a full house, most people get too many shadows. Some people can make it work. I was not willing to invest the time and energy to figure out how to get an ultra to work on my house because I have too many inlets with the porch and everything. It would create too many shadows. But they do work really good for just like a garage projection, like using it for like a matrix or something, virtual matrix.
Yeah, but I think that's kind of interesting, right? Because everything you see when you look at some of the posts, everyone says you need a short throw projector. You need a short throw projector, like it's the de facto standard. And I guess at the end of the day, maybe that's just because that's what people are used to, and they seem to think it's a better option, right?
Well, if you do a standard throw, then you have to be further from your house. In my case, I would have to be like in the street because I'd have to be too far away from my house because I don't have the depth in my front yard to cover it. And the further you get away from the house, the less bright it seems. So if you have a really high-end projector, like if, let's say I had one of those Disney projectors, I could be like a block and a half over and still project on my house and be fine. But with my cheapy projector, I have to be as close as possible.
All right. Yeah, and one last thing too. There's a vendor out there, I guess, called Luxido, right? They seem to be pretty big. I know one of our major vendors, they also are a reseller for them. I don't know anything about them. I would just say that they seem to be more of a projection mapping in a box, right?
Yeah, I was going to say
Plug and
it's
play.
kind of a one-stop shopping for those that want a simplistic thing where you can kind of put it together really easy, and you pay a premium for that. It's a little pricier than a la carting it on your own, but if you're looking for kind of an easy one-stop shop thing, then they're a really good thing for that. It can be kind of limiting if you want to be really creative with your shows, but a lot of people love it. It's great for getting started. Just try to buy the best projector that you can if you think you're going to stick with the hobby. If you're not sure if you're going to like this, then just get a cheaper used projection, maybe an Epson 535W to start out with. But if you're not sure you're going to like it, but if you know this is really your passion, this is what you want to do, then you can invest in a higher and good projector to start with.
Yep. All right. Well, cool. Well, thank you, everybody. I think we're good.